Right. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. And for some people, welcome back because you've been following the Media Club for a very, very long time now. And I must take this opportunity to thank our hosts who've been doing a great job. I'm sorry, our coordinators who've been doing a great job, Samantha and Michael. They met at the Summer Institute way back in 2018 and they hosted for nearly 4 years. And we're back after a break. It's March 2023, our first meeting of 2023. And today we have hosts Ash and the author whose work we're discussing joining him, Lisa. Welcome, everyone. Um, just a quick check if everyone can see captions. If you cannot see captions, please go down to your Zoom activity controls and right in the center, there'll be the option to enable captions. So if there's someone who just wants to read them or read them along as we speak, you can use that. Francia, I hope that's a good announcement on your behalf. I'm also joined by my co-coordinator, Jocelyn Young, who will close the meeting. But before that, I'm handing it over to Ash, who's our host for today, with Lisa. Hi.
Hi everyone. It's thank you to Media Education Lab for organizing this. It's nice to be here. This is uh, my first time at the Media Club. So it's nice to be here. And it's also nice to come and discuss Media is Us, book by Lisa. I think I was able to read it a little while ago, and we've had some back and forth conversations around it, and I'm really keen on uh, hearing everyone who is here and understanding better about the book and about the author as well at the end. As we begin, I think first thing that we'll just open the conversation with would be the fundamental or the basic premise, or even which begins at the title, Media is Us. And the uh, op- uh, and the what the book, the premise of the book, which connects how media, the communication, and everything that we create is interlinked or connected to us. So that's where I would like to begin and understand from everyone what do they think about the basic premise of this book, starting with the title itself, which is just there, like to understand what it's about right from the title, Media is Us.
People, please feel free to jump in, just unmute yourself and speak, or if you feel more comfortable in doing so, raise your hand and we'll call on you. How you can raise your hand is you can just go down to your Zoom activity controls and in reactions, there's the option to raise hand, which I'm doing now, although I'm speaking. So I can probably kick us off in that direction. I think it was very interesting for me personally to look at the way Lisa tried to tell us that we often don't really define media. And there are so many ways in which we could define media. Is it the medium itself? Is it the platform? Is it the technology? Is it what is it? So and in the end, what does all of it mean if there are no people to share it, use it, talk about it, through it, etc. So that kind of goes back to how it is media is us, and media is nothing without us, the people. I hope I'm in the right direction because the author is right here.
So I think what you're saying is that the receiver has the person who is receiving the communication or media message has, which is also pointed out in terms of how we take in those messages based on our own experiences in life, where we are, what we do. lot of different factors come into play as well. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to jump in, and I see people being quiet. So my kind of moderator, facilitator, the part of me is like itching to ask some questions. So I guess I was just curious to know, always like when people come to a meeting, to a workshop that I'm leading or a meeting, like why they decided to come. So I really would like to hear from everybody, like a few words. If you can introduce yourself, like one by one, and just say why you decided to come today.
Well, first, I can speak first. I'm from New York City, so not too many inhibitions about talking. I have to be honest and say I did not read the chapter because I'm in school. So I have all this other reading. I have 2 projects to do, but I felt what I can come and listen and also interacting with people in the field because I'm really very new to media literacy. So I'm taking a certificate in digital and media literacy. Of course, it's by Zoom or, distance, which I miss the classroom a lot. And I would like to work with adults in teaching them, giving them tools to decode the news, both traditional and digital. But whatever I can garner and whomever I can come in contact with, since I'm by myself in my house, gives me an up. It's good for me to have contact with other people, and especially in the field. So I will turn the floor, as the expression goes, to whomever else would like to go next.
Thank you, Barbara.
I can go. I'm Mary, and I participated in the very early years of the Media Club way back in the 2018-2019 sessions. And then, as things happen, my schedule got too busy and I couldn't continue. So I was excited to see that it's back. I also had worked somewhat with Lisa through the JMLE. And so when I saw that the title of this first reading was by Lisa, I thought, okay, I'll come. So here I am. And to answer the first question, I was thinking about the chapter as an accessible description of media, as a way to communicate. But what I really liked about it is the latter part of the chapter that talked about the human influence in the way that we communicate.
Thank you, Mary. Anyone else would like to go?
Or I know with Zoom, like it's everybody's waiting, thinking, should I wait, or are we going to just ask people? How about Kate?
Hi, I was going to jump in anyway. So good
Thank
time.
you.
So I'm thinking that a lot of this is about like our framing of media and like even our framing of media literacy in larger conversations in the discourse, if you will. And so how like, whether it's like that negative approach or like that avoidance or something good. Looking at the chapter, I wonder about like the types of media that people talk about and say when they're like first asked, like if you ask me now, would I say, oh, a news source or, Facebook, or what I say, a movie, right? And those are like all influential aspects of media, but would vary depending on the person.
Right. Thank you, Kate. So if in terms of the way I think the book is definitely very, at least the first chapter is very accessible, and when I was even reading it, I'm not used to reading academic texts. So when I was reading this book, I think it was easy to read and understand and take back the ideas, which is what I found really interesting about it. The premise, of course, but also accessible in terms of understanding some very key crucial components. So that's a good point that was highlighted.
All right, how about Bob?
Hi, I'm from Dexter, Michigan, and I'm interested in how media affects us, particularly culturally and emotionally, and specifically the use of fear and how it reinforces beliefs about ourselves. Like one thing that I'm working with is this belief that we're naturally aggressive and competitive. And there's really, if you look into it, from my perspective, there doesn't seem to be a lot of support for that. And it actually came historically in a time of great fear. So that kind of reinforced my interest. We need to understand fear and help people to understand how it affects how they see and think our world and each other.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Bob, I'm just curious, when you speak about the time that fear came about, what decade or what specific are you looking at? I think he's muted. You're muted.
Bob, you forgot to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back centuries, but more recently, Hobbes and Spencer, really kind of the survival of the fittest and that kind of thinking. Both lived lives totally filled with fear. And you have to wonder how did that affect their thinking, how that affect how their worldview and how they saw the world and each other.
Okay, I just want to know if you're talking about a broader than the U.S. That's why I wanted.
Oh,
you know,
yeah, talking historically.
War. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And increasingly in the United States and everywhere, as fear has been used as a political tool.
Yes, and encouraged to keep people separate, very divisive. Yeah, very sad.
So when we talk about keeping people separate or divisive, I think it also the reason why that also happens is due to the way messages are created or who is creating them. Like one of the principles, like the 5 principles in the chapter, one of them talks about the power dynamics of the difference in power that is there by who is creating the message and who is receiving it, things like that. So I think that was another point which I thought maybe it's a good, Barbara raised a good point about how it is being used. And at the end of the day, it is us who create it, who receive it, and are very closely linked to the media environment.
Unless somebody else wants to go, I don't want to be a pig, and that's not to give pigs a bad reputation. So I'll wait a second. What I'm feeling in the US especially is that the political and economics are what is making this country very, very divisive and keeping us in separate realms. The corporations and politicians are tied together because money runs this whole election, it runs the whole country. You can't depend on the commercial media to bring you factual information, because as I did a report on the Telecommunications Act of 1996, and 6 mega corporations own 90% of the media, which includes corporations that manufacture weapons and oil companies. By keeping us divided, it gives these people a lot of power. And because our elections start immediately after the person is elected, this presents a lot of problems. And the last point I'll add is, having worked on single payer healthcare, Medicare for all, like normal countries have, where everybody is covered from birth to death, I really have come to believe and see, and I do have a master's degree in community change and civic leadership, that it is the responsibility of the movements that want to make change to go to people who are different than themselves and listen and bring information and then include them in the movement. And I'm very brokenhearted that this movement to me is very exclusive. And that's how I'm in media literacy now, because I can't keep working with them. And yet I feel I need to make change. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And let's see if somebody who didn't say anything yet maybe can jump in and share also why they're here, and if they got a chance to look at the book, you know, what they think about the premise. Jocelyn.
Hi all. I have not had a chance to read very far, but I'm definitely interested, especially with kind of the themes I'm hearing everyone talk about. Elizaveta, if you could talk about maybe the concept of power and how that ties to what we think about media and how we think about that influencing us.
Okay, so first of all, for those who didn't get a chance to look at the chapter, which is fine, and hopefully you will after this conversation at least look through it. I have a list of 5, I call them 5 fundamental principles of communication that I believe are relevant to the present day, but they also explain how people communicated in the past. And when I talk about media, I understand it very broadly. So I often hear that media, you know, means technology, means modern technology, you know, equals medium equals technology equals modern technology, right? You know, computers, smartphones, et cetera, et cetera. But if we think what technology is, you know, the wheel is technology, right? So, you know, writing like a pen with the technology. So that's why I talk about, you know, the Egyptian pyramids. There are images there that you can say it's a form of media, right? Because it's also conveying certain ideas, right? And you can definitely find a lot of power about those images, right? And you can think about fear as well, right? You know, people being afraid of the gods, the you know, and acting in a certain way, or you know, the pharaoh and whoever, you know, could punish them for doing things wrong. Anyhow, so yeah, so there are 5 principles there, and one of them is about power, right? Because I think that the way people communicate with each other reveals power relationships in society, but also reinforces those power relationships. So it's a circular kind of influence. But the other 4 principles, I think, are also really important because my goal was to shift attention to self-awareness versus, you know, thinking like, oh, there are some other people who have power and they do certain things through media, which, you know, is certainly true in some ways, but there are many ways in which each one of us participates in this communication, never-ending communication process, right? If we go online and say click on certain links, you know, it seems like a little thing, but it matters in the grand scheme of things. And you know, if there are a lot of people clicking on a certain kind of type of stories, those stories there'll be more of those stories, because people you know, who earn money by creating those stories, like they think, oh, okay, so this is good, so we'll write more of those stories. So you know, and it's difficult to talk about like who is you know, who ultimately holds like the power in this very complicated system. Because I mean, you can talk about mega corporations that, you know, have influence a lot of people around them, but also we can talk about specific individuals that do things throughout their daily life, then somehow feeds into the system as well. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Jocelyn. You'll need to read more to get to that part. And I talk more about power actually in a different chapter. Somebody wants to jump in and say something? Davina?
Yes. I kind of really like how, although this is just an introduction to the entire book, the chapter keeps making you think about the questions you need to ask yourself if you're looking at things through the lens of media literacy and media education. About, and not just about the 5 principles, but how media is us, the title of the book itself. You know, where's the information coming from, who's saying what, why, what is the source? And I think it fits really well with the idea that we are talking about here, and what Barbara was mentioning earlier as well, where you possibly cannot have some factions of the media do their job as well as you'd like them to, and how can we question them, or how can we talk to people about these issues?
Yeah, Bob. And I'm
Yeah, that kind of brings my thinking back into fear and what I understand, a concept that I work with called fear-based thinking, that actually most of us, I think, in this world today suffer from to one extent or another, because of the effect of what fear does to our mind. I mean, fear, if you're in a crisis situation where your life is in danger, your focus is narrow. Everything is focused on the threat. Everything not essential, they call it the fight or flight response, and there are different variations of that, but everything not essential for survival shuts down when the sympathetic nervous system sends a surge of energy, gets a surge of energy to the muscles, and we tend to hold that back in tension. So there's some effects of that on our own thinking and on the thinking of others. And I think, first of all, we need to recognize it in ourselves. And I mentioned this belief that we live in an adversarial world. There's a couple of really good books I can share with people. I don't have them. It's a Dutchman named Bergman or something like that, who wrote one of them that summarizes this information about this mentality that we've adopted. But there's also other components of it, as we get a scarcity mentality. Fear creates us to think we don't have enough, or that we're not good enough. And it makes us more self-centered. It makes us more controlling and a need for certainty. And so as we let go of that in ourselves and begin, and one other component that I need to mention is conditional belonging. And I think that's a real serious part of it, where we don't have a natural sense of belonging. We've placed all these conditions on it, you know, how you look, how you act, what you have, what you do, all of these things, and they're never enough. And so people are trying to, I think it's one of our most fundamental human needs, is that sense of belonging. And fear undermines it, and it creates fear when we're stuck in conditional belonging. So the bottom line, and my point is that I think we need to understand our own mindsets and how it's affected by fear, and be able to sort through the information coming at us to say, wait a minute, okay, there's some fear-based stuff here. I need to breathe and ground and look at this in another way, but also understand where people are coming from, who are promoting these concepts through the media, that they're stuck in the same way we get stuck. And so how do we become unstuck together? First of all, we have to do it ourselves, but then the next question is how to move forward on that.
I would also add to what you're saying, the importance of your upbringing. Childhood plays such an important role in how you view the society. If you don't grow up in a trusting, where you feel safe in your own house, you're not going to feel safe in society dealing with strangers. So childhood. Just to throw in a George Lakoff's book, Don't Think of an Elephant, which talks about why rural people vote a certain way and progressives, I put in quotes, vote a certain way. So that gives people insight when you try to reach out to people that are different from yourselves, why they may think the way they do, that they carry again what they learn in childhood out with them into society. And if it continues to be reinforced, then people on both sides are going to say, why should I bother? To try to make relationships form or create relationships with people who are different than themselves.
I think, in a way, this ties very well with the section that Lisa's written on language matters. I think for the benefit of the larger crowd here, if you could just talk a little bit about language matters, the section, and linguistic determinism that you speak about in the chapter, Lisa, if you could just say a few words.
You asking me to
Yes.
So what you just want me to kind of explain what I saw that Bob had his hand up, so I wanted to make sure that you.
Okay, thank you. I just had a quick comment in response to Barbara. I find it helpful to think in terms of the condition, or of the adaptive self and the authentic self is who we really are. It's our temperament, with what we were born with, our gifts and our potential, and of course that happens in relationship with our environment. Also had to adapt in many cases, as Barbara pointed out, to really unhealthy conditions. And so we've created this sense of self that's adapted, and those conditions don't necessarily fit the current situation. And that's where we get into trouble, especially how we've adapted to fear. And so our process of adapting to fear is what we need to understand and then learn how to work through.
All right, thank you so much for adding this, Bob, and for Barbara as well, for explaining how you see this connection to the polarization crisis. For me, it is a very important topic, and then I do tie the book, this conversation about media, to polarization, and the importance of when we look at ours, when we try to better understand ourselves, we also start better understanding others. So we see, for example, like our own fear reactions, like the Bob said, then we can better understand that others, think about when the COVID started, and people started like running to the stores and buying stuff, and some were like very criticizing those who were running and buying stuff, but you can understand that, and it's, for some people it was more difficult to deal with their fear, right? But anyway, so going back to Divina's question, so the language, why I think it's really important to pay attention to the way we talk about media. And I know nobody said anything about this, but I heard from some people, and I know that not everybody essentially accepts the way I use grammar here to talk about media. They say media should be plural, right? Media are, which, I admit that it's the origin of the word, media is plural of medium, but I also notice that people more and more, like, language is changing. So more and more using media is singular, like, data, I kind of embrace this trend, by the same time acknowledging that especially in academia, like, media is the golden standard. Right, but I did call it media is us. And I in this chapter, I talk about how different people have there's a variety of opinions about media. Like, everybody has an opinion, right? And it can vary from, like, oh my God, this is horrible, like, media is ruining our lives, to, like, no, it's amazing, and it's really giving us so many opportunities, like, like, look at Chat GPT, like, there's like a whole spectrum of opinions about this going on right now. It's like, it's ruining our lives and the internet will be ruined, versus, like, no, it's like such a big step and it's very important. So there's a variety of opinions, but I noticed that whatever opinion people hold, they use this language that positions media as something, like, outside of them. So we talk like media does this or doesn't do that, or we can use media this way, right? And I just point the reader's attention to that and say, like, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't talk this way, because this is just, we're used to that, and it's fine, but we should just realize that it's I don't know, like a figure of speech, right? And it's kind of hiding the fact that there are people behind media, and not just some other people, but also us, because if we can say that, well, there's a person who wrote this book and they communicate these ideas, like, to me, but I read this book and I made certain interpretations of this book, so I participated in this, and it really matters how I read it, or that I bought it in the first place. Stuff like that. So, and that's why I have this section in the first chapter that is called language matters, and that to kind of have people pay more attention to how they talk about media, without necessarily, like, feeling guilty for that, because, like, yeah, there are a lot of ways, like, actually language is a form of media, which I didn't even come up with this idea. Somebody told me, and then I came across the same idea in the book. But because language is a tool that we learn, and it works in a certain way, and it's, we know how it conceals certain values and biases and assumptions, and it's very limiting, right? And it has power over us of what we can say, what we cannot say. And it's essentially like all the other people who have used the language and created it to be the way it is now, and all the other people who are using it, who are, we're kind of, when we're using language, we are grappling with this kind of power dynamic here. So that's another way in which language matters. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you so much for asking. I think it's a really interesting topic.
Thank you, Lisa, for that. I think Mr. Saripalli, he's been adding a lot of things in chat. So if you would like to share a few points here with us.
We all must have read Shakespeare. We also must have read O. Henry. Maybe some more poetic, some more real stories, histories. So when Shakespeare in one of his books says that, take the mutton without a drop of blood falling down. So it's a sort of diplomacy which is taught to the children at the youngest age. That means whatever you utter can also be diplomatic and need not hurt the other person. So we need not be so uncourteous to the others. Keep the courtesy After all, humans are humans, and every human may have some perspective, but it need not harm the other person immediately. And naturally, coming to other items, genders and other things, politically also, the important thing is whoever, either administrative or political, they have to keep a balance in the society. That's their duty. So for getting some votes, they need not ditch the other by talking unbalanced language. So bias is not a system for the modern world. That's what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you. Some very good points there. So I just had one thing. Yes, Bob, please go on.
I'm sorry, I just is reflecting on and I wonder if it's fair to say that there are two kind of distinct kinds of media, and I'm not sure where the line is between them. That could vary depending on who's looking at it. But there's personal media, interactions and communication, between individuals and small groups. But then there's the one-to-many media, and that's where I think we run into most of. I mean, there are problems in both of those. But I'm wondering if separating them might make it easier to look at how we approach it and deal with it.
I don't know if it was a question for me or just an idea to share. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's some scholars who focus on they call it mass media, right? And then personal, I guess you could say personal media. I guess in my scholarship, I don't focus on this difference as much because I think it's kind of blurry. Like, for example, you can say that, we text to each other or we send messages through different programs. Like I send a message to just one friend. So it's personal, but at the same time, the technology that I'm using, the tool, it's a media tool that, was created, like, say I have an Apple iPhone that, a lot can be said about Apple and iPhones and apps, specific apps that I'm using, right? They all come with different interesting background and baggage, one can say. Right. So I do think, for some purposes, analysis purposes, it is an essential difference, sending a message to millions versus sending a message to my mom, right? It is an essential difference, and you should not discard it. In my personal research, I don't focus on it that much. That's my thing. Okay, I just noticed that here's a message in the chat from Kate. So I'm going to how much time do we have? Let me just okay, here. All right, so I'll read the question from Kate in the chat. I have a question related to how media shapes us. People today often talk about how the internet has impacted our brain and how Twitter's character limit and overall design contributes to polarization. I'm curious about your thoughts. Media fundamentally impacting behavior and how we can work to step outside of media even as we acknowledge it as us. All right, thank you so much. That's a great question. And my thinking about this have been evolving and still evolving. So it's one answer is it's complicated, and the bigger answer is that I think it is very important to see how say communicating on Twitter or having access to information online or 24/7 news cycle, how that creates how that impacts us, right? And I think it's important to remember that how human brain works, and what Bob mentioned, like it's like there's some essential things about how people think, how they react to things, right? So a human brain is pretty flexible, right? So if we grow up in one kind of environment, like one feature of the brain might be more, like, I don't know, emphasized. Not that it cannot be changed, but we certainly, like, if we live in the world that has a lot of it, we can write down information, find information quicker, maybe our memory will be not as good as somebody who didn't have that, who didn't have like literacy and had to remember a lot of things, like keeping in mind that people's memory is limited for sure. So creating literacy was very useful in terms of being able to navigate a lot of information. So so I think we should keep that in mind and recognize that, yeah, the fact that, for example, it's easy to go online and participate in conversations about different controversial topics, and then like if we don't process our reactions and emotions about the way other people online are communicating with us, then this can lead to more polarization, right? So so in this sense, it is, the way people communicate with each other. So I would rephrase it this way, like when we say media fundamentally impacts behavior and how we can work. So because media is us, you just substitute that. You don't say media impacting. It's like we are impacting each other. People are creating new tools. People are interacting in different ways. Cultural forms are coming and going, right? So, and it's not like all like, point of no return. Later on, there might be some other ways to communicate and other technologies, and people like start communicating in a different way. So just whenever you think like, does media like I write somewhere in the first chapter, like, that people are worried that media can hurt us, like, can it hurt us? And like, can people hurt each other? Yes. So in this sense, but it's not, but we shouldn't think about it as like something like this amorphous like thing, like a media like floating somewhere and hurting us. It's people hurting each other, and it's not just like some other people doing stuff to us. Like, we need to recognize that we might be doing also something in the process. Like, if we feel like it's online, like there's a very toxic environment, like maybe we contribute to it also somehow, like, and maybe we can act differently to diminish that, stuff like that. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I think we have last few minutes left. So if anyone has anything more to add, some questions, just in general, they have something in mind, feel free to share. And if you haven't read the chapter, you can go back, read it now as well.
So if no one really has a question, I would like to use my privileges and ask a question myself, because we have Lisa here, the author here. Right, so I'm just going to take that as yes. I was just kind of sharing the screen because I want to highlight this bit that you've written. What about all those violent video games, sexist commercials, addictive social networks? The children's future may be at stake. So this was of particular interest to me because I study young people in social media. And I kind of want to ask you about the techno panics that we have around young people's, whether it's social media or just generally media use. Because there's a lot of, for lack of a better word, duplicity or double standards that people have, where something is harmful or dangerous or a complete no-no for children, but it's all right if I do it as an adult. And I wonder if there's something that we can do where, children can also voice that, media is us, and we also have autonomy, we also have agency, and we would like to resist.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that's I'll try to answer in like a couple minutes because that's a huge topic. Obviously, I mean, I think it's important to recognize the developmental differences that you know, some children might not. I know it might be more difficult for them, for example, to say, well, I don't really need that, right? You know, toy. I'm not saying that grown-ups are great at that, right? But there are developmental differences that need to be acknowledged. On the other hand, I do think that there's some kind of like double standard or almost like hypocrisy that you know. So I'm noticing, for example, my kids, you know, they watch videos and, you know, they see some commercials and they were like, oh, there are so many toys out there. Like, you know, I want this and I want that. And so I'm explaining to them, well, we cannot get everything, right? But I'm also trying to be very empathic because I know that, you know, I also like, you know, going to online store and looking at stuff and being in my mind, like, you know, I want this and I want that. Well, I will not get it, but I want it, you know? So in this sense, I think it's important to see this, as you said, double standard. And as for you, like you started this question with like panics, right? So definitely avoid the panics, I think, you know, so it's not my idea that every new form of technology brought some kind of fear, you know, going back to again to Bob's topic, you know, panic, right? About like, oh my God. And we know that most of the time it was not like, oh, saving the world or destroying the world. It was somewhere in between. And it's really a matter of how we treat it. So probably like ChatGPT is kind of the same situation. But I would love to talk more about it some other time about ChatGPT for sure. Barbara, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I had a question. I'm afraid to try to pronounce the person's name. Sarapalli. He talks about UNESCO and the Internet for Trust. Is there anything he would like to elaborate on? I hadn't heard about it, and I was curious to know a little more what this is and what is they're looking to achieve.
Are you asking me the question? I can.
Yes, you posted it, so I'm curious to get more information.
We did have last month 4 days of discussion. People around the world has assembled in Paris into 2-3 rooms where conferences were held. The discussions ranged from how to control the obscenity, or what you say, caste, or whatever you say, religion or based things which will ignite a spark immediately in the society. So the Broadcasters Association has to have some sort of exercise before they go to the film regulators. One item. So universally, they should accept that this film, the sexuality or the words or the, the content is reasonably good for the society. It will not harm the society. That is what they have to certify themselves. This similarly, the TV Broadcasters Association, they have to form their own association and see the content, moderate the content. The third, what we have asked is 24 hours news channels are a useless thing in the modern world. At least 3 hours in a day, content after content, they can go for media literacy in one form or the other, either for the children or for the adults. Even people who are studying undergraduate, some content they need it, which others might be having, which they may not be able to get it. And that is their responsibility to see that a discussion or a display or something takes place. The third is when the books and other sort of items are published, what sort of course, small media, they are asked to create what we say is algorithms in such a way. Now I am attending, my name and date will be there on this. The algorithm has to be created by the content maker in such a way that I post a picture in Twitter. The day I posted my name, either my ID or my password or something should be there, so that immediately when somebody who scrutinizes it, he will understand that this is created by so and so person. They need not go and see from which IP address the person has created and who is the person. They need not, it should be on the corner of each of the images or videos they create. So these are the discussions. Thank you.
Oh, this is very interesting. I know in the United States, there are certain states now, New Jersey, have made media literacy mandatory, teaching it in classrooms in New Jersey.
Excuse me, 1 second only. The major persons who attended the conference are from United States and Canada.
Oh, from Canada, okay. Yeah,
and Canada.
Yeah, I don't know the US. We are, again, because the money and the politicians are hand in hand. Will they end up will they put some regulation on the internet to change?
Another 1 second. UNESCO membership is withdrawn by Israel and the USA. So they may not accept it.
I'm so sorry to jump in and cut off a really engaging
Thank
discussion
you.
here, but we are at time. So thank you all so much for joining. Our next Media Club is going to be on April 3rd, it's the first Monday of the month, with Kate Dalton, alongside Christina Cordero and Christina Mota. And we will be sending out a little bit more information about that and the media text to prepare you all, but you don't have to re-register for the Zoom invite. You can use this same link to join. So you should be all set there. And if you have any questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Davina. You can reach us at mediaeducationlab.com. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Ash and Elizaveta, for hosting. This was great.
Thank you.
So much. This has been stimulating. And thank you for the book, Lisa.
Thank you. See you.
Thank
See you,
you.
madam. See you.
Have to read the chapter, if not the whole book. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening, since